All right, 5 things that I wish I knew as a beginner guitarist. Number 1, you don't fret notes by squeezing between your thumb and your fingers. Instead, you use the weight of your arm to pull the strings down against the frets. Now, this is a super foundational concept, but 95% of guitarists out there get this wrong. I've taught students that have been playing for decades who have never heard of this. They've had multiple teachers who've never taught them this. I myself didn't learn this until like my 2nd year of studying classical guitar in university, and it blew my mind and it changed everything. On the flip side though, it did take me a while to break the habit of years of squeezing. So if that's you, give this time, be patient, and I promise you it is worth it. So most guitarists, when they're playing a note, generate the required amount of force by just squeezing between their fingers and their thumb, the thumb squeezing, pushing against the back of the neck, and their fingers pushing the string down into the fret. Over time, especially with more difficult chords, with stretches or bar chords, you'll start to feel a lot of tension building up in your hand, especially right here in your palm, and that's unpleasant, can potentially cause injury. It slows you down. So there's a totally different way to play, and that's dropping your shoulder and using gravity and the weight of your arm to pull the strings into the fret. Your thumb should rest completely neutral and relaxed on the back of the neck. It's only there for support, not to provide this counter pressure. Now, to test yourself to see if you're really doing this right, you can literally take your thumb off the back of the neck temporarily and just feel like you're hanging on each note. You can do this with chords as well. I'm allowing my shoulder again to drop and just the weight of my arm to pull the strings into the fret. Practice this, give it a try, and let me know if it makes a world of difference for you. Second thing that I wish I knew as a beginner guitarist is that you can define your own success with the guitar. So just like life, right? We often default to society's definition of success, right? This external definition of success that is just kind of imposed on us. We've got to chase the prestigious job. We've got to chase that car. We've got to chase that big house. All things that maybe you personally don't really care about, but there's this just inherent pressure to get there just because that's what success is, right? But the key to happiness and true purpose in our lives is to define that success for ourselves. Decide what success means for you and then pursue that. And it could look very different than what society tells you is success. So the same is true for guitar. When I was first starting out, I had this assumed idea of what it means to be successful with the guitar. And that meant I had to be able to play super fast, right? Really flashy scales. I needed to be able to play really complex pieces, some like arbitrary level of difficulty that is really never reachable because that bar is always raised, right? But then once I get there, I'd be successful. And then once I got there, I'd be like, well, once I get there, I'll be successful. I needed to be able to practice like 5 hours a day. And so I was constantly ridden with guilt if I didn't hit that, again, arbitrary number just because I'd convinced myself that that's what it meant to be really successful with the instrument. As I've matured as a guitarist over the years, I learned that just like with life, I get to decide what success means to me with this instrument. So for example, I could really care less about being able to play super fast scales. I gravitate toward music that's usually a little bit slower, super emotional, singing beautiful melodies, and I just want to be able to express those, put my heart out on these strings, rather than caring about how flashy and impressive my technique is. So for you, you might decide that success means just being able to play expressively. You might decide that success means being able to spend 30 minutes a day with this instrument and feel like you accomplished something, right? Rather than chasing some arbitrary number of hours in a day that you need to practice and always feeling guilty when you don't arrive there. Focusing on mastering the practice disciplines and the focus that's required to make progress in a minimal amount of time. If you haven't taken the time to really align yourself with your own definition of success with this instrument, then you're going to end up practicing the wrong things because you're going to be chasing some goal that isn't meaningful to you, and it absolutely destroys your enjoyment of where you currently are in your playing because you're always chasing whatever that next thing is that will make you feel successful. And then once you arrive there, you realize like, oh, I didn't really care so much about this in the first place, and that goalpost has moved anyway. Third thing I wish I learned as a beginner is this little pull-off trick. I used to really struggle when doing pull-offs, especially to open strings. I found that when I would execute the pull-off, I would often accidentally hit whatever the string was underneath. So in this case, I'm pulling off on the 3rd string from the 4th fret to the 2nd fret, and then from the 2nd fret to open. And I'm exaggerating it a little bit, but you can hear that open B that's being accidentally plucked when I pull off. So if you find that no matter what you do, you run into this pull-off where you can't avoid making that string underneath ring out, what you can do is just rest a plucking finger that's unused currently. So like in this case, if I'm plucking with my middle finger, I can rest my A finger on the 2nd string underneath, right? So that if I accidentally pluck it with my pull-off, it'll be muted, so it won't ring out. Just a little tip that has made my life a lot easier. Number 4, bass stopping. My playing as a beginner always sounded really muddy, and I could never put my finger on what was causing it until I learned about this technique called bass stopping, and then instantly cleaned up my playing. Fixed all the issues that I was hearing. So what was happening was when I would play a bass note on an open string, so like a low E, and then move to a different chord with a different bass note, here an open A, for example, once I moved to that next chord, it just didn't sound good. And I realized after learning about bass stopping, it's because this E was still ringing out when I'd moved to this A, and they were kind of clashing against each other. So what you do with bass stopping is you literally just stop the previous bass note that was still ringing out. So in this case, it's subtle, but if you listen carefully, it sounds a lot cleaner. What I'm doing is as soon as I play that A bass note, my thumb just hops up and stops the low E from ringing. Same thing, if I was to go back to the E, my thumb is just gonna then follow through and stop the A string right after so that it's not still clashing. Instantly cleans things up. And number 5, your audience doesn't care about experiencing a flawless performance. They care about how you make them feel. So many of my first performances on stage as a beginning classical guitarist, I was terrified. I was so nervous for all the wrong reasons. I was so fixated on the need to play this piece perfectly that I totally lost sight of the big picture. When I'm in the audience listening to a guitarist, I'm there to have a meaningful experience, and that experience isn't defined by how perfect the performance is. It's defined by a ton of factors, many of which being just the expression that the guitarist is using, the emotion that he's infusing the notes with. Often, any mistakes that he makes honestly can elevate the experience, because then I feel a connection to him. He's relatable. Like, he screws up too, just like me, right? So my experience is not dictated by the level of perfection in his performance. And I would lose sight of that when I got on stage. Now, I'm gonna pause here and remind you that even if you're just learning the guitar for yourself and you say like, well, this doesn't matter, I'm not trying to perform for anybody. As soon as you tell somebody that you're learning guitar or that you play guitar, you're a performer. Because guess what they're gonna do? They're gonna ask you to play something, right? So instead of being constantly terrified of that scenario and having a laundry list of excuses that you can pop out at any minute so that you don't have to play something, what if you got comfortable with this idea of playing for your friends, playing for your family, right? So keep that in mind. You are a performer, whether you like it or not. All right? So when you're in a position where you need to perform, don't worry about playing perfectly. Focus instead on the meaning behind every note that you play. Put your heart into it. Understand that you could be inspiring this person in ways that you can't even comprehend, and it has nothing to do with how perfect the performance is. Maybe that person needs to hear a flawed performance because they can then see themselves in that. They can be like, man, well, he's doing that. He's learning the guitar in his 30s, in his 40s. Like, maybe I can too. She's learning guitar when she's busy with school and work. Like, maybe I can too. These are the things that you need to focus on when you're about to give a performance, and it'll put your mind at ease, or at the very least, it'll help you focus on the right things when you're playing. All right, that's all I got for you today. I hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments down below if it was. Tell me which one of these resonated with you the most, was most helpful for you, and let me know what you would potentially add to this list. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.